What is up, you guys? It's Lex. Welcome back to my channel. Hope everybody's having an awesome day so far. Back with another fun little video today. Welcome to episode 2 of my B58 build series. If you haven't seen episode 1, make sure to go back and check that out. That's where I disassembled the old engine and we saw kind of what happened. So I'll link that in the description box. Definitely go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Today, we are gonna start assembling the new engine. I am still learning. Ronnie's gonna help guide me through the process, so I don't know exactly how far we're gonna get. But with that being said, we gotta get started, so let's get right into it.
Today, we're finally assembling our engine, and we're gonna be measuring stuff, torquing stuff, and yeah, assembling your short block. So we have our bearing shells in on the block side. The bearing shells have also been cleaned, the back of the bearings. The face of the bearings will get cleaned before we actually put the crankshaft in. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna take our main caps that have already been cleaned as well, and we're gonna put our cap side bearings on. Once we do that, we're gonna put them in place and we're gonna torque them to spec, which ARP specs these studs to 60 foot-pounds. And of course, that's where at the machine shop, that's how we align hone it too. So it goes to 60 foot-pounds, and the machinist will go and make sure the tunnel's straight. So yeah, we're gonna do that, and after that, we will measure the crankshaft, zero out our dial bore gauge to the crankshaft measurement, and check our bearing clearances. That's going to be step 1. After that, we're able to drop the crankshaft in and move on to our rod bearings, piston rings, and all that good stuff. These are upgraded fasteners from ARP. They're studs instead of bolts, and so they're going to have better clamping load, and they won't fatigue as much. Better tensile strength, just better when you're making more power. I'm gonna have Lex take some measurements as well. I'm gonna do the first one just to kind of demonstrate here. I'm gonna have her do this one so you guys can see. This one I'll do myself. But this is a micrometer. It's far more accurate than plastic gauge and means like that of measuring. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take the air gap out, which is what I did with the ratchet mechanism. And I'm also trying to see if there's like any taper on the journal. So it seems to be the same tight fit. 2.173 10,000ths of an inch is the journal number 2 measurement. So we're gonna write that down.
Guys, it takes years to know what it feels like.
No, it actually does. Like, you know, like, see, this feels proper, and then right over here, it's like 1/10 looser.
Not bad, huh?
Not bad.
All
right, guys.
Expecting worse.
So we have all 7 measurements of the main journals. 1 through 6 is basically the same, with the exception of number 2 being 1/10 smaller. Number 7 is the biggest one, so it's 3/10 bigger than the rest of them, and 4/10 bigger than number 2. So I'm just going to zero out my dial bore gauge to my nominal measurements, which are going to be basically 1 through 6. And when I measure number 7, I'm just going to keep in mind that it's 3/10 bigger. So hence, I have to take away from the clearance that this is going to show me. 3/1000, too loose. 2 are 3.5. Way too loose. Look, number 4 is perfect. The mains, all of them are on the loose side. We're right at like 3.31 on the mains. We want to be closer to 2.5. A little bit looser, a little bit tighter is okay. We have some leeway there. So what we're doing right now is we're actually using one H bearing and one HX bearing. So one shell is half a thou bigger as far as the clearance goes. So we're just going to swap them all to standard size bearings and recheck our measurements after we torque the mains. So we're going to be right around anywhere from 2.4 to 2.8 is acceptable on these. Alright guys, so we already measured and set all the main bearing clearances. One reason why it's so important to always double check your work and use precise measuring equipment when you're dealing with engines, preferably if you can, you always want to mic the journals. You always want to not assume, because you know some people will just throw standard bearings and you know run it and think everything's going to be good. Journal number 7 on this particular engine combo that we have on this crankshaft actually was around 3 to 4 tenths of a thousandths bigger. So that's quite a bit. And since we're using all standard bearings on number 7, it was actually super tight. It was right around 1920, so 2 thousandths of clearance. This engine is going to make a lot of power, so we wanted to have a little bit more clearance than that. So we ended up putting an HX bearing or an STDX bearing, depending on if you're using ACL or Kings, and we ended up right at 2.6. So the tightest we have is 2.4. The loosest we have is 2.7 on this engine, 2.8 on this engine, which is right within spec. So
now I'm gonna put in the oil squirters. I'm gonna use a little bit of assembly lube on the seal, and then once we put the bolts in, I'm gonna use some blue Loctite on those. Motherfucker. That's not a little bit. That's a lot of it. Have you ever built an engine with another girl before?
I have not.
Have you ever built an engine for another girl?
I have not. I don't know if it's ended up in a girl's hands.
So what are we doing now? We're gonna gap some piston rings, which Roni doesn't have any extra of, so I absolutely cannot fuck this up.
Yeah.
So let's listen
usually
very
don't have
carefully.
extras. So yeah, I've already gapped 5 of the top ones. There's one of the top ones that I haven't, just so we can show you guys and kind of let you know what we run as well. Top ones are gapped at 19 thousandths. The bottom ones we're going to gap to 22 thousandths. Ideally, is you want it to fit in nicely, and you want it to be a little snug. A little bit, because it's a feeler gauge. You got to feel it when it's the proper clearance.
I felt it.
You felt it? All right. So let's do the next 5 that I've already done, and then on the 6th one we'll demonstrate how it's actually done.
Okay.
Now, one thing to be wary of is if you look at the top. There's either going to be a writing, which we have a writing here. There's either going to be a dimple, or there's going to be some sort of indication of it's the top of the ring. And you want to be gentle with the rings during assembly. They're pulling it out, putting it back in. You want to be gentle because the ring is a very fine device, and if you move it too much, it'll bend and it'll never come back to its shape. So I'm going to square this up, and Lex is going to get the feeler gauges, and she's going to see which one actually fits in here. This way we get an idea of how many thousandths we need to take off to get to our desired clearance, or end gap rather. Sometimes you'll get some rings, like the Total Seal stuff that I use for the Evos, they'll be too big, so you can't even square it up in the cylinder, so you got to take a lot of material off. That's where a ring gapper like that comes into play versus sitting there and doing it by hand. It takes a very long time. So I know that we need to take at least 11 thousandths off of this. 11 to 12 thousandths to get the 19. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back this off until I can put this ring all the way down without it making contact. See, it's still making contact. I'm going to back it off a little bit. Right there, it's barely making contact, so I'm going to make a little bit of contact. Right there. I can barely hear it, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just do a 0 cut. That's just squaring off the face. So now I know I need to take at least 12 thousandths off to get to our clearance, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to do a 10 thousandths cut, so 2 under, just to be sure that we're not going to take too much out. Because you can always take more out, but you cannot put more in. One more. Measure twice, cut once. It's a rule of thumb when you're building anything.
Alright guys, so now it's time to measure the rod bearing clearance. Roni's going to show us how to do that. And then we get to assemble our pistons and rods and install everything.
First order of business. I've already torqued these rods down. There's a manufacturer specific torque they specify on these it's 65 to 70 foot-pounds. We actually had to go to 75 foot-pounds to get these to stretch. That's a method that a lot of people kind of wing and don't follow. We always stretch all the rod bolts when we assemble an engine. What we're doing with a stretch gauge is we'll measure the length of the bolt before torquing it. And then when you'll zero it out, and then when you go and torque it to a specific value, it'll stretch to a certain amount. At the recommended torque that they gave, 65 to 70, around 65, it was only at 5 thousandths of stretch. We need to be from anywhere from 6 3/10 of a thousandths to 6 7/10 of a thousandths. So what we're gonna do is same thing we did for the main journals. We're going to mic them. We're going to take down our measurement. If they're all the same, fantastic. Sometimes 1 or 2 tenths variation is very normal to see. And we're going to zero out our dial bore gauge to our measurement, and we're going to check our bearing clearances with the rods torqued. So after 30 minutes of struggling, the circlips for the wrist pins, these are what retain the wrist pin in the actual pin bore. You can see why it would be a bad idea if this was just free floating. The way I like to do these is the open end will face in, and I'll push it with the palm of my hand like 40% of the way, and then I'll push this down. Now the rest of it, I'll use this wrist pin to push it in like so. And then you want to do it both ways. There you go. So that's it. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna mate the rods to the pistons. What I want to do is I want to make sure the intake valves and the rod tangs are facing the same way, or the exhaust valve and the rod tangs. Doesn't matter as long as you keep them all the same across. So these are the intake valve reliefs. The reason I know this is because these are bigger. As you can see, there's a bigger distance here than over here. So this is intake side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the rod bearing tank side where the intake side is. This is just to kind of keep everything consistent. And assembly lube is very, very, very important, because it's your saving grace when you first start the engine and the engine is basically building up oil pressure. Some engines will like pre-prime when you're cranking them, some will not. And again, this is for the first initial couple seconds of startup until it starts oiling itself. The pin, this is not directional, but there's going to be riding on one side. Just to keep everything consistent, I'm going to place it on the same side for every single rod and piston. So this is going to be on the left side of the intake. Called Quick Seat. It's made by Total Seal. It's a graphite lube. I always use this during assembly, especially on super hard piston rings that we have with the Evo stuff. I use it across, all builds. It just allows the rings to seat quickly, and you want this to happen essentially immediately as soon as you start up the car, because the piston rings actually get a couple seconds to seat properly. Otherwise, you get what you get with the compression and leak down. She puts the same amount of assembly lube as the Chipotle worker puts guac for me. Last thing she's gonna do is put a little bit of AL8 on the piston skirts. We're gonna rotate the engine until the journal that we're about to drop this rod onto is dead center down. And then what you can do, don't blow off the cylinder wall now because you have the graphite lube, so just blow on top of the actual journal itself. Wiggles the skirt in carefully, go all the way down. Okay, so now we're seated. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the end of a mallet. I like to do it with the big one. So you're just gonna slowly tap, 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 and if you feel any resistance, you stop. Keep going. Good. Okay, now either you will guide the rod with your hand, or you'll have someone help you guide the rod onto the crank journal. If you're working with a normal engine stand like a 4G63, 4V11, VR38 on its side, the rod will drop straight in, but since, if you want to show them this engine stand has an angle, so the rod naturally wants to tilt this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to guide the rod, so as she's hitting it with the mallet to go down, it lands perfectly on the crankshaft and it doesn't score the crank. Slow, okay. That's it. It's time for our rod cap now, and we're going to show you guys how to stretch rod bolts, and we're going to torque them, but we're going to check the stretch value and make sure we're where we need to be. We're going to take the moly lube off. We're going to put some fresh moly lube on there, and we'll measure each one. Usually I like to do it with 2 stretch gauges, but I forgot to have Danny grab another one this morning, and I only have 1. So what that means is we're going to have to torque up the rod, check stretch on one side, loosen it, torque it up again, check stretch on the other side. The way we're going to do this is we're going to tighten up the rod a little bit. What we're doing is we're seating it on the dowel, because the rod cap is doweled, well, the rod is doweled, and I'm going to back these off, both of them actually. So the bolts are loose, but the rod cap is on. What I'm checking right now is the length of the fastener before it is stretched. So right about there is my 0 point, right there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to torque this up to like 15 pounds and 15 pounds, and then we're going to swing it to 75, and we're going to swing it to 75 right here. And then we're going to check the stretch on this side. We're going to loosen it up, check the stretch on the other side. We're right at 7/1000 of an inch. No, it's right at 6.5. Sorry, it's right at 6.5. So 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. 6.5, 6, 7. That's exactly what ARP calls for. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to loosen both of them, and we are going to do the same thing on this side. So we're going to zero out our stretch gauge to the bolt to our left and do the same thing and see what stretch value we come up with. And with these fasteners, I like to loosen them up little by little. Okay, so here, you zero it out. It's right at 6. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to loosen them up again. I'm going to take the moly lube out, put fresh moly lube and put it back in. Usually that'll reduce the friction a little bit, and you'll the same torque point you can get to your desired stretch. So.
All right guys, so the bottom end is completely assembled. I'm really happy with it. I learned a lot. It takes about 10 foot-pounds to turn it. Do you want to turn this for me, since I'm holding what we'll be installing next? Yeah. So we have these funny car hoops, or O-rings, whatever you want to call them. We're going to install these in the next video, and we're going to be turning the short block into a long block. So make sure you guys stay tuned for episode 3 of my B58 build series. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.